Yes, Mendoza, and this is my Module 6 CREW discussion. So in this discussion, we'll be discussing the CREW method, which is for the maintenance of materials and weeding purposes. Part of a librarian's maintenance duties include deselection, which is also known as weeding. CREW stands for Continuous Review, Evaluation, and Weeding, and it's used in conjunction with the following acronym MUSTY, which stands for misleading, ugly, superseded, trivial, irrelevant, and elsewhere. I decided to focus on a children's biography section. Just a little bit of background. I used the El Paso Public Library's online card catalog, which can be accessed at www.elpasolibrary.org. And specifically, I decided to focus on the Armijo Library branch. Some of the filters I used. First, I filtered all books based off of the Armijo Library branch, the location. Then I selected and filtered by genre, which was biography. And then to narrow it down to a children's biography section, I went ahead and limited the search to AR interest level of kinder through fourth grade. And 65 results returned at this particular branch. Just some general impressions. This library had a very decent selection of biographical subjects. It had historical figures such as Amelia Earhart, civil rights activists such as Martin Luther King Jr., politicians like JFK, and then it had sports figures, recent sports figures. I even saw one for Zendaya, the actress, so kind of some more recent biographies. The second general impression was that this library does offer biographies in English, Spanish, and English Spanish combinations. You can see some examples of titles below. Conoce a Pablo Neruda, and then a side by side, the story of Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, lado a lado, la historia de Dolores Huerta y Cesar Chavez. So I thought that that was cool. My third general impression, most of the resources in the section were published within the last 10 years, but there were some of the resources in the section that were 11 to 20 years old, and then one resource was over 30 years old, and so those were just my general impressions. Some main criteria for weeding. Again, we'd be using the acronym MUSTY. So we'll be looking for misleading, ugly, superseded, trivial, irrelevant, and elsewhere products that will help us in our weeding selection. So here are some decisions as to why I weeded and the reasoning why. First of all, in the misleading category, out of the 65 titles that I reviewed, I decided to focus on a picture book of Christopher Columbus. The reason I would decide to weed this resource is it's outdated and its inaccurate portrayal of Columbus as a heroic figure, and it neglects the harmful impact of his actions on indigenous peoples. You'll see there that the publication date was 1991, so it is kind of an outdated resource and not really in touch with the times. So that would have been, out of the entire collection, the only one I would have removed for misleading. When we get to the ugly category, I would say none. I couldn't weed any of these books based on their tattered and worn condition because, again, I'm only accessing them through the online card catalog. I'm not able to physically view them to determine that. So I had none for the ugly category. In the superseded category, there was quite a few resources about Abraham Lincoln. And I decided out of all the resources, I would remove the Abraham Lincoln by D'Aulaire. The reasoning is I would read this book based on its 1987 publication date, as it likely contains outdated information inconsistent with our contemporary understanding. And like I said, this library did have several more recent and updated versions. So because of that, I would have weeded that older version. Trivial. So under the trivial category, I would have weeded no titles. The reason I wouldn't weed any of the materials based on its triviality is because all the biographies that I checked out were centered on individuals who significantly contributed something to history, or they were of interest to the patrons that would be searching for them. Irrelevant. Out of all the resources, I decided out of the 66 that I would remove Here We All Are by DePaulo Tommy. And it kind of hurt me to say that I would remove it. But I did call the library and I inquired about the checkout frequency of some of the children's biographies. When I asked specifically about this one, they informed me that this particular book had only been checked out once in the past 15 years. So, because of that, nobody's really interested in it, nobody's really checking it out. I would weed it for those purposes. Last, elsewhere, I decided that, well, I wouldn't necessarily want to weed this title, When the Beat Was Born, DJ Kool Herc and the Creation of Hip Hop. But I did find the digital version of this book, easily available amongst their digital titles. So I just thought that was of interesting note, but I wouldn't necessarily want to weed that one. So overall, has this library section been weeded effectively? I would say my overall rating is good job, little buddy. I think overall the library's children's biography section has been meticulously weeded. I would recommend stricter weeding criteria for the titles over 10 years old because, man, some of those were old, just to ensure the collection remains current and relevant. Here are my references. And last, thank you for listening.